listening to The Phillip Jordan Show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the Phillip Jordan Show. That's right. This show's still around. The rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated. And I'm back. It's been too much, really, since we've done a proper episode of the Phillip Jordan Show. But glad to be back. Glad to be doing the show this week. Going to be pumping out shows again once a week. YouTube channel, all that good stuff. And I got a fun show for you guys today. I am going to give my thoughts on the 2024 SEC schedule. I know that's news a few weeks old. Like I said, it's been 2 months I've done this, and I haven't really given my thoughts. So I will do about a 13 minutes on that. And then we'll have two great guests. Tony Tsoukalas from TideIllustrated.com will join to preview Alabama, and we'll preview the defending Sunbelt champion, Detroit Trojans, with the voice of the Trojans, Barry McKnight. And we'll close up the show with some other good stuff as well. But before we jump into all that, let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. You can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You're on Apple Podcasts. Please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button. I hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I'll also read that on a future edition of the show. Check out all my work over at Last Word on College Football and the Wiregrass Daily News, and you can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. All right, I want to lead off this week's podcast talking about the 2024 SEC schedule, because look, as at the top, it's been 2 months since I've done a proper episode of the podcast, and that was one of the big things that went down during my 2-month hiatus. Like I said, we did that Florida State thing that was a pre-recorded, something me and Brandon were trying out, didn't work out, that I played for you guys early last month. So it's been about 2 months. And you're saying, well, Phillip, this is kind of older news. We've kind of heard other shows go over this. If you don't want to hear my thoughts on the 2024 SEC schedule, go down to the description below. I put timestamps. If you want to get to Tony Tsoukalas and Barry McKnight, go right ahead. My feelings will not be hurt. But, yeah, it's the Phil Jordan Show. I got some stuff I want to talk about with the schedule. And for the YouTube audience, I'm going to put up a graphic. This comes from SEC. Give them all the credit for that. Of the teams, who they're playing, SEC schedule 2024. Yeah, and of course the thing too is it was built this schedule release. You know, like the NFL does their big schedule release show. You know, it's not really it wasn't really a schedule release. It was telling you who the SEC teams are playing. Even NFL does that. They'll let you know who each team's going to play, but then they have later on the schedule release. This is just who the teams will be playing home and away in the SEC. But it was quite interesting. And, of course, SEC spring meetings, the 8 games versus 9 games conversation come up. Oh, they're going with the 8 games. Of course, Texas, Oklahoma, even though they're in the schedule and they're coming into the conference, but they're not part of the conference yet. So they were not allowed to vote on this. And from everything I've seen, they would have voted to go 9 games, a 9-game conference schedule. I mean, that's what they do right now in the Big 12. They do, we play everybody, but it's 10 at the time. Then it won't be this season, but 10-team conference, you play everybody once. But they were in favor of 9 games. But a lot of your power teams in the SEC were wanting to go with the 8-game model, which, if this is the long-term model, everything we've seen, you have 1 rival, 7 rotate. If you go with 9, it would be 3 rivals permanent, and then the others will rotate there, the other 6 games. And as soon as I saw this, though, it's like, okay, yeah, this is obviously TV driven, money driven, of why they don't want to go to 9 yet. Because when they signed their new deal with ESPN, it was 8-game conference schedule. So now you're looking, okay, 9 games are not worth as much as 8 games. So maybe we should rethink our deal. But as of this moment, the deal's the same, obviously. So they're going to go with 8 games. That's the reason I feel like it is. And I also feel like there are some teams in the conference that probably feel, okay, we really like that bowl money that we get. And if we go to a 9-game conference schedule, that removes one non-conference game. Now, we can be a team that can schedule very light, or in our non-conference kind of almost guarantee 3 to 4 wins, and then we only need about 3 more wins to be bowl eligible. In this scenario, or if you had 4 weak teams, you could just go win 2 games in the SEC, then you're bowl eligible with 6. So 9 will make it difficult on some of those teams as well. But look, this is the SEC. This is the top conference. And you gotta pull up your big boy pants. Strap them up and go play. I mean, that's what this conference is. So I am a proponent for 9 games. I have been. That has been where I have always said on that. But they didn't ask me. They didn't call me up and say, hey, Phillip, what should we do here? I think a lot of their decisions would be better if they did call me up or email me or text. If Greg Sankey wants to hit me up, I'm always available to chat and tell him what I think should be done here in the SEC. But anyways, let's look at some of this stuff with the SEC and the 2024 schedule, because I have some thoughts and haven't done this in 2 months. So I want to get my thoughts out there for everybody to hear. So, and look, obviously you guys know I live in Alabama. So I really want to look at Alabama and Auburn overall. So in 2024, Alabama's non-conference schedule: Western Kentucky, South Florida. They'll be out Wisconsin. That could be quite interesting. I want to see where this Wisconsin program is going to go. They'll play Mercer in November. So the SEC slate, they play Georgia at home. That's going to be fun. That's going to be a great game to see that these two will play in a regular season. And I was looking at some stuff, and these two have only played 5 times in the last 20 years in regular season. Of course, they've had some SEC championship games they played against each other, but regular season 5 times in 20 years. South Carolina, they will play Auburn, and Missouri, that will be the home teams they will play. They'll be at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. That'll be fun. And then at Vanderbilt. So just throw Vandy in there, ease it up a little bit. They will not play A&M, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, or Arkansas, who they're used to seeing. So to keep LSU in there, obviously you're going to keep Auburn. You add Georgia, Oklahoma. Those are big matchups too. And then let's see, of course, Tennessee too as well. So Alabama's keeping they're pretty much keeping all the rivals except A&M. The A&M game has become a big rivalry, and that's something you're just going to have to, with this 8-game schedule, you're going to sacrifice some rivals, some teams that you're used to playing, and that's going to transition me into Auburn. Auburn non-conference in 2024. Known opponents, there's one with a question mark. You have Cal, New Mexico, and Louisiana Monroe. Cal, they play at Cal this season, and the next season Cal will make the return trip to come to Auburn. Now, Auburn in their schedule, and I got it up on the screen for you if you're up on YouTube. If you're not, just follow along if you're part of the audio-only audience. But at home, they'll have Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt. But on the road, they will have at Alabama, at Georgia, at Kentucky, and then at Missouri. So now, if you're an Auburn fan, you notice LSU's not on there. Mississippi State's not on there. Ole Miss is not on there. Some teams you're used to seeing. And I'll be honest, going to miss. I believe the Auburn-LSU rivalry is one to keep. But like I said, you're going to lose some in this. Like I just mentioned, Alabama and A&M. You're also going to lose that Auburn-LSU game. They will play. We know they will play probably a good amount of times if they stick with the 8-game model, which I hope they don't. I hope they do go to 9 down the road. But you will see LSU and Auburn, I'm sure. But that is going to be a bummer going into the 2024 season and not having Auburn and LSU playing each other. Now, Georgia. Now, this is a team we know has gotten criticism over whole offseason of their schedule, which we'll throw this out there for Georgia. They originally were going to play Oklahoma this upcoming season in non-conference. But when Oklahoma and Texas were coming in, the SEC asked Georgia, they said, let's not schedule these two teams right now until they're in the conference. So they lost that. So let's look at Georgia's 2023 schedule before we look into the 2024 schedule. They play UT Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, and UAB. That's your month of September. You should win all those games. And at Auburn. So 5 games, you should be 5-0 after September. Kentucky, I think Kentucky is going to be a better team this upcoming season. But I will say this about Kentucky. The problem with Kentucky, they play a lot like Georgia. They don't play a physical style, smash mouth. It's kind of like when Alabama played that style. If you play like them, it's kind of hard to beat them because they practice against that every single day. So that's why I don't think Kentucky has much of a chance against Georgia in these kind of games, in these games at all, because they play like them. So they should win that one. Then you're at Vanderbilt on the 14th of October. Then you're off. You should play Florida. I'm not that high on Florida going into the year. I think this team will be lucky to win 6 games. Then you play Missouri, a team that scares you, but you get them at home. You should win that one. Then you have Ole Miss. We'll see how they are with their quarterback situation. Spencer Sanders should be the guy. You got Jackson Dart still there. You got Walker Howard, but with Spencer Sanders, we'll see what the kind of team. And this will be at the end of the year. And remember, this past season, Ole Miss played well for the first 8 weeks, but in that last month of the season, which a lot could have been with Lane Kiffin and that Auburn flirtation, they struggled. So this will be kind of in that Ole Miss trying to, was not do what we did last season. Then it will be at Tennessee, then Georgia. So really, and look, Ole Miss, to be honest with you, Georgia should beat them. Georgia's more talented than them. But the Tennessee game is probably, that's the only time I can see in this schedule where Georgia gets tested. And like I said, they would have played Oklahoma to start this year. But now let's flip it for 2024. Now, Georgia's non-conference schedule, they will play Clemson, Tennessee Tech, UMass, and Georgia Tech. Had to protect that Tennessee Tech and UMass game. That's why you couldn't go to 9 games. I mean, what would we have done without those barn burners of games of Georgia and Tennessee Tech and Georgia and UMass? So, but they will play Clemson. That's a good matchup. Now, looking at their 2024 lineup, at home, they will play Auburn. They will play on the neutral site against Florida, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. Nothing really stands out there. But now, when we flip it the other direction, they will go on the road. Now, remember, they play Clemson in a neutral site game, so they won't be in Athens for that. You got to go to Alabama. You go to Kentucky. You go to Ole Miss, and you go to Texas. So Georgia's going to have a much, much tougher schedule in 2024 than they've had this season and really what they've had in recent years. Because now that you strip divisions away, you can't just line up and, because there's been a lot of years. And lately, when you look at the East doesn't always compare or line up well with the West. Well, now where we've got this, Georgia's going to play some better teams. Like I said, you're playing at Alabama, who we're sure is going to be good, and Texas. And will you be playing Quinn Ewers or will you be playing against Arch Manning? And Texas has got talent. We'll see what Sark can do this upcoming year. If Quinn Ewers has a big year, he's probably gone. So you're probably looking at Arch Manning, but still that will be a much tougher schedule on that one. And just kind of looking at some of the other big teams, Florida, they keep Kentucky, play Georgia, of course, and Tennessee from their old SEC East. They'll play LSU as they normally do. They'll have a battle with Ole Miss. They'll play Texas A&M in Gainesville. They will have to go to Mississippi State, but they will go to Texas too. So that's interesting on their side. Some of the other Oklahoma, their 2024 schedule, I like it. Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, and they'll have the neutral site game with Texas. And then they'll have to go to Auburn, as we talked about, to LSU, Ole Miss, Missouri. So that's going to be fun seeing Oklahoma going to Auburn and LSU. Tennessee, about your normal suspects. At home, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky. They will have Mississippi State coming to Knoxville. They'll go to Arkansas. They'll go to Georgia. They'll go to Oklahoma with the fun Josh Heupel. That's where he played, won a national championship, and they'll play at Vanderbilt. And then you'll have Texas playing Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi State at home. Those are cool matchups, those first two, especially Florida and Georgia. And then we get Texas and Texas A&M once again, and of course Texas Oklahoma is going to play. Looking forward to that matchup between Texas and Texas A&M. And I kind of do wonder when we actually do get the schedule, when we know the dates, where will these games be placed? Because will Texas and Texas A&M be a game that's played the last weekend of the season, or will it be somewhere else on the schedule? Because over the last few years, Texas A&M and LSU was closed out on that last week of the season. So we'll see how that goes with that. So that's kind of just my thoughts on the schedule. Like I said, I haven't been doing a podcast, so I didn't get my opportunity to really discuss that. So what's you guys' thoughts? Let me know what you think about the 2024 SEC schedule. Really would be intrigued with your thoughts. All right, guys, now that is it for the open. Now I'm going to play the interviews. First up, I'll be joined by Tony Tsoukalas from TideIllustrated.com, where he is the managing editor there, part of Rivals. And then after that, the voice of the Detroit Trojans, Barry McKnight. And then I will close up the show after we talk with Barry. All right, everybody, joining me first up this week on the show is Tony Tsoukalas. You guys know this, the guy I go to when I want to talk all things Alabama. He is the managing editor for TideIllustrated.com, part of Rivals. And Tony, I appreciate you coming on the show, preview the Crimson Tide, and kind of, hey, we're almost SEC Media Days are right around the corner, so football season is getting closer.
Yeah, it's creeping up on us, especially with SEC Media Days. That's later on this month. We're into July now, so this is like the last free month without really any kind of football, and then it starts up with the preseason camp, and then before you know it, it'll be September 2nd in that opener.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for it. I know June is kind of like the month where it's the slowest, I feel like, because it's after the draft. And we have the spring meetings early in the month. After that, it slows down a little bit. Nothing's slow in college football now. News is constant all the time. But it feels like June, if there is a slow month on the calendar, June might be it.
Yeah, that June up until like we're saying, like the SEC Media Days. That's if you cover college athletics and you want to plan a vacation or something like that, that's probably your sweet spot to try to hit. I have a lot of friends that get married around that time too, just because it's one of the times where it's the slowest. So, yeah.
I think that is a philosophy for people who don't even cover sport, just college football fans in general. There's like, let's get married before the season. It's not happening during the season. So.
It is hot though, so if you're doing it, I guess you plan an indoor wedding because it can get pretty steamy these last few days in Tuscaloosa. At least it's been really, really hot.
Yeah, I know. I'm down in Dothan, and we were in the upper 90s to 100 last week, but this week it's in the low 90s. So we have a cold front coming through this
there
week.
You go. Cold front in the low 90s.
Yeah. So, anyways, I usually do this at the end of our conversations or anybody, but actually I'm going to start to tell people about the site over at TideIllustrated.com. What you guys got going on right now?
Like you said, full Alabama sports. We're part of the Rivals Network. It's me, it's Brandon Howard who covers recruiting. We've got football, basketball, recruiting. Those are what we mainly focus on. We cover on some of the other sports as well. And we have a really good community in the Talk Champions the Champions Lounge message board, and it's a fun place to be. It's kind of a lot of the conversations like we're gonna have over the next few minutes. I think we have those all the time over there, and so it's definitely something you guys should check out.
Yeah, right. Go do it. It's always get into those communities like that. Where you can be with if you're an Alabama fan, go check it out. Or maybe if you're not an Alabama fan, go see what Alabama fans are talking about. Go check it out too.
Talk some trash, I guess. Be prepared though, because you're joining a whole community of Alabama fans. So, but yeah, we'll take a description from anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk Alabama, and this is kind of kicking off here on the show. Me previewing a bunch of these teams around the Southeast, not just SEC, but we wanted to start off with Alabama, and I honestly, Tony, I feel weird asking this question, but I ask this question about a lot of programs when I do these previews. And for Alabama fans, 2 years out of national title, that's like some teams going 50 years. It's like an eternity for Alabama fans. But what is the state of the Alabama football program?
Yeah, I mean, you're facing a decisive year where if Nick Saban doesn't win this year, it'll be the longest they've gone without winning, which is just crazy, when you think about it. When I first saw that stat, I was like doing the math backwards, and I was like, okay, 1, 2, no, 1, but it is crazy that this is the longest, we're entering. If he doesn't win this year, it'll be, the first time he's gone that long without winning. So, I guess there's a little bit of a concern heading over the Alabama program. I think when you look at it, it all boils down to the quarterback position, and can you get that figured out? If that gets figured out, I think the concern levels are going to drop dramatically. But that's such a big question, and there really isn't a real answer to it. That I think I think until you kind of have, as long as that's hanging in the air, there's going to be some concern over Alabama, and rightfully so, because if that doesn't get figured out, it could be an ugly season.
Let's jump into Tommy Rees, the new offensive coordinator. So last time I had you on, he had not been hired. I think a day or two after you were on the last time, he got hired, which is usually the case on podcasts like these. Something we talk about something, and then before you can get it out, the news breaks. But Tommy Rees became the offensive coordinator, right after that time we talked. It was during basketball season when we were talking. Alabama hadn't even started spring or anything yet. Now, I do remember, and I'm going to throw this at you, you mentioned Greg Roman that you would have liked to have seen back then. But anyways, what was your thoughts on Tommy Rees when he got hired?
Yeah, I think that, initially there were some other names. So initially there was a little bit cause of concern of like, is this the best guy Alabama could have gotten? Kind of having some time to think about it, some time to chew it over, and just really look at, what Alabama has and kind of settle in. I don't think it's necessarily a bad hire. I think, when you look at him, the two things that stand out for me are he's going to get the running game back. He's going to get out. I don't think it's going to be, dramatic or just a total switch to the running, with 3 yards in a cloud of dust. But I do think that he's going to reestablish the running game, which would be big. And then I think when you look at the way he's dealt with, either young or unestablished quarterbacks at Notre Dame, I think that's what he's going to have to do in year 1 at Alabama. And so what better guy to do it? He's a young coach. He was in a quarterback battle himself not too long ago. He's not that removed from his playing days. So all those things together might really make sense for Alabama with this hire. And I think it has the potential to be a pretty good one. And so far, he's been really positively received. So it seems like a really good hire. We'll find a lot more about that in the fall. But I think what we've seen so far, the general consensus is that I think Alabama is pretty happy with its hire so far.
Yeah, you think about that with him, and it's wild because he isn't that far removed from being a player himself. And look, this is not me throwing shade at Bill O'Brien, but that's an advantage he has over him because now he can relate to these quarterbacks, I think, a lot better than Bill O'Brien could. I mean, I think Steve Sarkisian and Lane Kiffin were guys that could relate to him because they're older than Rees, but not maybe as old as Bill O'Brien. Not as they're just their personalities can relate to the college quarterback. But that's got to be a big thing too with Rees, how he can just relate because he's, like you said, he's been in these battles, he's done this before, and he's not that far removed from it.
I think the biggest thing when you go and you get a guy like O'Brien or a guy like Brian Dable is those are NFL guys that need an NFL quarterback behind center. And you had one with Bryce Young, and so it worked. I think you saw with Brian Dable that year, Jalen Hurts was the quarterback, and he really struggled to adapt Hurts's game to the offense, and eventually Tua came in, and the rest is history in that championship game. But I think that a lot of times those NFL guys can be set in their ways or stubborn or not as innovative as some of the college-centric coordinators. And that's one of the things where I think Rees is going to do well is he's dealt with different styles of quarterbacks at Notre Dame. He's a quarterback himself. And I think he's going to be able to work with, whoever it is behind center. He'll be able to adapt his offense to whatever game he needs to. I don't think any of the quarterbacks are so drastically different from one another that you're going to have, a totally different game plan. If, Jalen Milroe is the guy or if Ty Simpson's the guy, I know they have different skill sets, but not as maybe dramatic as it may seem. So I think overall he'll be able to keep his same scheme and the scheme that Alabama wants him to run and combine that and maybe just highlight whoever he has behind center a little bit better than maybe O'Brien did or Dable did or any NFL guy would come in and do.
So we'll jump to the quarterbacks. You mentioned two of them, Simpson and Jalen Milroe, but Tyler Buckner also as well, the transfer coming in from Notre Dame. When you look at this quarterback room, and obviously, after the spring, neither quarterback looked great. I think they both had highlights, but also there was obviously things you can improve on. And then not too long after that, Tyler Buckner is coming in to Alabama. How do you see these three quarterbacks? Is Buckner a guy that you see being the starter, or is he a guy to come in maybe an insurance policy, a good backup to go with them guys? How do you see this competition?
It's really dead even. I mean, you could make a really good case for all three of these guys, and look, like Jalen Milroe is going to probably enter the fall as the quarterback one, even if it's just barely ahead of the other two, just because of his experience. And that's the way he was in the spring. He was the first team quarterback. So like, you got to give him a slight edge. Also, just what he can do as a runner. And if he has the abilities as a passer. So if he can get that together, I think he probably has the highest potential out of all of them. I think when you're looking at arm talent, Ty Simpson has the highest potential in terms of just, spreading the ball up, throwing a perfect pass, leading his receivers, those things that you really want you don't always see, I guess, in young quarterbacks. He's advanced in his years for that, but he hasn't done it on the field. And so we have to wait to see if he can do that. And then with Tyler Buckner, he's also a really good runner. I think, he's kind of maybe a combination of the two of them, and he's familiar with Reese's system. And you got to think, he wouldn't have came to Alabama if he didn't feel comfortable in that competition. I'm not saying he got promised anything, but he obviously was told something by the coaches that made him feel that way. Even if that's just that he'll have a chance to compete, he obviously is, coming in here to win that starting job as well. And he has a lot of ability. He's a guy that's dealt with injuries, and we really probably haven't seen his true potential on the field. But he has flaws as well. I mean, he turns the ball over too much. And I think that's going to be, if there's one thing that's going to, prevent somebody from winning this job, it's turnovers. So he'll have to work on that. So all three of those guys, I just think, you could really do it. If I'm giving, Milroe an edge, it's like 34 to 33 to 33, it's not, it's not a huge edge. And I wouldn't be surprised if any of those guys win. I don't. The narrative that I do see is sometimes is people say that it's going to be a lot. It's going to go deep into the season. I don't see it going past Texas. I think at the end of the Texas game, you will know Alabama's quarterback for the rest of the season. That's just Nick Saban's style. If Alabama's changing its quarterbacks throughout the season, they're losing multiple games or somebody got hurt. I don't think that, they'll be switching it. In fact, I'd be surprised if all three of them started a game this season. I think that would be I could maybe see two of them starting, but I can't see all three of them starting.
Yeah, it just seemed like in the past, whenever there has been a competition that did go into the season in Alabama, it was usually game two where it was pretty much figured out. Because I remember when A.J. McCarron became the starter, it was like the Penn State game, the second game of the year he took over. Then Jalen Hurts, he took over like after the second game.
No, second quarter. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, he came in and right away and never looked back. So, yeah.
So there's a pattern here if people want to pay attention to that part of it.
Even Cooper Bateman and Jake Coker, they made that, I guess, the mistake to move the Cooper Bateman. It didn't work out against Ole Miss. And then you saw Jake Coker come in and retake the reins. I mean, you could see a situation like that maybe happen with Texas, and maybe it takes a loss at Texas or against Texas. Maybe Jalen Milroe's like unconvincing and, against Middle Tennessee State. And then you put in Ty Simpson or Tyler Buckner against Texas, and he gets just overwhelmed, and then somebody else comes in for that game, and then all of a sudden, either you come back against Texas or your quarterback after that. I could see a similar situation. I'm not saying they're going to lose the Texas game. I'm just saying like that's what you're looking at. But you'll know at the end of that Texas game whether it's a win or a loss. I think where you stand at quarterback and who's the best option.
You mentioned running back earlier, and I even remember like leading up to 8A. When Nick Saban after the scrimmages or the press conferences he would have on Mondays leading into that, he'll talk about running backs. He said running backs should not be an issue for us, and they're loaded with Jace McClellan and Rodo Rodale Williams coming back, and then you got, man, Justice Haynes. When I was watching it, the 8A game, when I saw him, I had not known going in he was a freshman, I said, where's this junior been all along for Alabama? I mean, but he already looks the part as a junior or a sophomore running back and not a freshman. But this running back crew, I mean, whoever quarterback is, they're going to have a really good luxury of having a super talented running back to hand the ball off to whoever it's going to be.
Yeah, Justice Haynes is Alabama's running back of the future. Now, I don't know if that future is later this fall or next season, but he will be Alabama's lead back at one point. Jason McClellan's a really good back, too, and I think he almost gets overlooked because everyone likes the shiny new toy. But so, I actually expect it to be Jason McClellan, and then I expect Justice Haynes to kind of jump a few people and take that number 2 role. The person that may be at risk of falling, and it's not really a knock towards his game, is Roydell Williams, because I also really like Jamarian Miller, or Jam. He's going by Jam Miller now. I think he's a rising guy that played really well, and so I think him and Roydell will kind of battle for that 3rd spot, at least in my depth chart, I guess. I have Justice Haynes being that number 2 guy, and then those 2. I think those are the 4 you're going to use. It's so hard to go past 4 that that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, from the running back standpoint, last year with Jahmyr Gibbs, he was a big part of the passing game too. Of these running backs, who do you think? I mean, not replace that production, because Jahmyr Gibbs is a great talent to do that, but just be kind of more of the threat in the passing game. I
mean, that's something that I think all of them do well, but no one's going to do it as well as Jahmyr Gibbs did. I mean, that guy was a different style running back than Alabama is used to having, and they don't have a guy like that. So I mean, Justice Haynes had, I think, 3 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown or something like that in the 8A game. I'm not sure about the number of catches, but I know he had 40 plus and a touchdown in the 8A game. He's a guy that could serve that role, but we've seen Jason McClellan catch out of the backfield. Roydell Williams is capable. Jam Miller, we haven't really seen it, so maybe he's more of a power back, but I would imagine he probably would be in the mix as well. And Richard Young, look, we're not talking about Richard Young. That's why I said I cut it at 4, but who knows? I mean, maybe he comes in this fall, and like you said, the running back room is so loaded. I mean, they're all rivals 100 guys in their respective classes. So they've got a lot of guys that can do it. It's a matter of just spreading it out and really kind of maybe taking advantage of the hot hand. So, I mean, if somebody's going, I don't think you necessarily need to take him out to put in a quote unquote 3rd down back. You can just keep things rolling. That might actually be better than having a guy that you would just say, oh, this is the guy designed for short passing, because I think all of them are going to be able to do it. So it will allow you to ride the hot hand.
Yeah, it's a bad problem to have if you're Alabama. So it's obviously would have all the running backs. Look at the defense. I feel like coming out of last year, there were some criticisms on Alabama defense. I know Alabama fans were vocal online about Pete Golding. Of course, he's only Kevin Steele is back. I mean, this team was 9th nationally in scoring defense last year, 12th in total defense. So it was not a bad defense, despite some Alabama fans maybe thinking otherwise, not to up what they're used to seeing. With Kevin Steele coming in, is it kind of like, okay, this is a guy Nick Saban knows, he's familiar with. This is his 3rd time with Nick Saban, and it's pretty much going to be business as usual on the defense side of the ball.
I think the hope, we talked about with Tommy Reese, the hope is to reestablish their identity in the running game. I think with Kevin Steele, the hope is to reestablish their identity as just a mean defense. He's going to need tough guys that can make tackles. And you look at the inside linebackers at Alabama, and no offense to Henry To'oTo'o, who had a great Alabama career 2 years. I don't think he's necessarily like the mean defender. And so, while I mean, a lot of teams would love a Henry To'oTo'o, and I'm not even saying that Alabama is going to be glad to see him go. I think they need, and that's just one guy. There's other guys on the team. There's this team. Throughout the team, there's a lot of players that needed to kind of have that tougher, rougher mentality. I think Kevin Steele's going to kind of implement that. So I mean, I know they're still going to have to be athletic, and you're going to have guys that can move and cover spread offenses. But I think at the same time, you're going to look and you're going to see, a tougher mentality, maybe more like that Reuben Foster. I think that's what you try to want to, establish, those guys that can move across the field, but they're still playing very aggressive, and they're going to hit you hard, and they're not going to miss tackles. They're, in Kevin Steele's defense, it's really important that the defensive that the linebackers are able to make the tackles, the inside linebackers. And so I think somebody like Deontay Lawson, if Kevin Steele can he's still young, if he can mold him into that role to be that kind of prototypical Alabama, hard-nosed, not going to take any crap from anybody linebacker, that could be huge for this defense. I think you're going to need that kind of enforcer. And I think having Kevin Steele is going to allow, hopefully, since he's kind of an old school guy and he's somebody that, knows Saban's mentality and he knows how things work in Tuscaloosa. I think that's going to be big towards kind of that familiarity is going to allow him to kind of have a head start at building that culture that you're going to need. Because I think you're right. Like Alabama had a good defense. They had really talented players on the defensive side of the ball, and it wasn't a bad defense. It was just, I think it's a culture change, and it's a mentality, and I think it's contagious, and if you start that with someone, then I think, the other players will follow. And so all you need is for that to snowball. And I think Kevin Steele, that's one of the biggest things he's going to bring to this defense.
Looking at Alabama's defense, I think people, not even that don't just follow Alabama, maybe just, outside the state, maybe outside the SEC, look and said, oh, wow, you talk about Henry Toto, but also Will Anderson not being there. Said, who's the guy? But I'm like, they're Dallas Turner. You have a guy right there that's, that's going to be fair. Quarterbacks are going to be afraid of this guy. You got to find out where he's at. But what do you think are now with Will Anderson? Now Dallas Turner, he can kind of be the guy there at that spot. What do you think for him? The expectations are for him.
I mean, just look at all the 5 stars you have at just the edge rusher position, because you still got Dallas Turner, you still got Chris Braswell. Those are 2 5-star guys. You've got Jeremiah Alexander, who was the top edge rusher in last year's class, didn't really play much, but now he's going to have an extended role. You've got Keon Keeley, the top edge rusher in this year's class, and there's still guys like Quindarius Robinson, who's pretty solid, so it's really, they're so deep at the edge rusher position. I'm not saying that they're going to be stronger or they're not even going to suffer from the loss of Will Anderson. Will Anderson might be, just pound for pound or, regardless of position, the best player in college football the last few years. Just what he could do and his just influence on the game was so great. And they don't have, nobody has that because there's only one Will Anderson. But I'm not worried from an Alabama perspective about pass rushing. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue. They'll have plenty of guys that can get after the pass rusher. I think if anything, if you're going to worry more, worry about guys like Byron Young, who provided more of the inside pass rush. That's where Alabama's going to need. You just lost Jamil Burrows to the transfer portal. That's a guy. So you're going to need your Jaheim Otis, your Tim Smith. If you're worried about pass rushing, those are the 2 areas you need those guys to provide that inside pressure, because the outside pressure is going to be there for days. And I think the inside pressure is going to be there. It's going to be solid as well. But the front 7 at Alabama, if there's one part of it that I feel confident about, it is on the edge and that ability to kind of like rush the passer with those long athletic guys that Alabama has.
Yeah, so quarterbacks beware this upcoming season. We're going against Alabama. And I've got a few minutes over. I told you 15 to 20, but last question. SEC Media Days. Alabama will be there. They will hit the podium on the 19th. What do you want to hear or come out of SEC Media Days when it comes to Alabama?
What do I want to hear? Who the quarterback's going to be? What am I going to hear? Probably the same stuff. It'll be interesting to see it's always interesting to see who they send from a leadership standpoint, and like who's going to be, I guess, the faces of this team. Obviously, they're not going to send a quarterback. And, so we'll probably see something like, J.C. Latham, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Corey Brooks. That'd be my prediction. So it'd be fun to hear from those guys. It'd be fun to see, a lot of the things we talked about, get their takes. I'd like to see what people think of, Tommy Rees or Kevin Steele. I'd like to think, see and ask if that mentality, that hard-nosed mentality on defense is already kind of catching on, and you think, based on the answers, you're always going to get positive answers from a group of players. So there's only so much you can pull, but I think you can kind of tell some things from, some of the vibe at SEC Media Days. And I think, you can kind of get your first sense of the team and what it's like heading into preseason camp. So I'm excited about it.
It's always fun. I always look forward to that week because, like you said on the top, it means football season is right around the corner. And Tony, this has been fun as always having you on to talk all things Alabama football. But if the listeners and viewers wanted to find out where they find you, and once again, tell us about TideIllustrated.com.
Yeah, like you said, the site's name is TideIllustrated.com, or you can go to alabama.rivals.com if that's easier to remember. You can follow us at Tide Illustrated on Twitter, or you can follow me at Tony_Tsoukalas on Twitter as well.
All right, sounds good, Tony. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Everybody joining me next this week on the Phillip Jordan Show. I am joined by Barry McKnight, voice of the Troy Trojans, the defending Sun Belt champion Troy Trojans. You can also check them out Monday through Friday from 7 to 10 a.m. in Montgomery on Sports Radio 740 with John Longshore. And also, I didn't write this down, but I meant to also check out the podcast, the Troy Trojans Athletics podcast, Trojan Talk. Barry is doing, had some really cool interviews throughout the summer while doing that. So all many different ways you can listen to Barry.
Yep, the podcast in a couple of weeks, Phillip, is going to feature John Sumrall. We're going to have him on. I think it's the second week of July, right before the Sun Belt Media Days, and after that, it's all full blast football. On the sports talk side of things on Sports Radio 740, you and I have talked about this before. Our calendar always, for me, it's slow in June, kind of recharge the batteries. July means SEC Media Days, which is in a week and a half up in Nashville, and then the Sun Belt Media Days near the end of July down in New Orleans. And then after that, it's full blast. I mean, August is all football, getting ready for the start of the season, all over the place. But for me, particularly outside of the talk show, getting ready for another year of Troy Trojans football, and it should be another good one, Phillip. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, I think it will be. I'm looking forward to this upcoming season. And yeah, and we've talked about this before when we do these, because it's like we were talking off air. It's like we usually do these in July. We connect for the preseason look at the Trojans, and June's kind of maybe the first part of June because you have SEC spring meetings, but kind of after that, it feels like if there is now in college football a time, or really college athletics, a time where it kind of does feel slow after the College World Series. You have a few weeks in June, but like you say, when mid-July hits, media days all over the country start off, it ramps right back up.
And for me, the football season starts September the 2nd. At home against Stephen F. Austin, and then it rolls into basketball, which rolls into baseball, and baseball always takes us to the end of May. So when you talk about a few weeks in June to kind of get your batteries recharged, that's all I get, because you're back at it again. It's 9 months on, really 10 and a half, 11 months on, and just a little bit less than 1 month off. So you better be ready when it comes rolling around, because it stops for nobody.
Yes, and it's all entertainment with Troy, with all athletics, not just football, the whole athletic program. Fantastic over there. And I'll tell you this off the air. There's been a couple times I've had you on. I've asked you about your career broadcasting and everything, but I really feel like I haven't asked a lot about the sports talk radio side. Like, I know we talked a lot about calling games and the great moments there. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? How did you first get into sports talk radio?
Well, I've been in radio for forever. I began my career when I was still in college, working summers at a radio station in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And then when I transferred to Auburn, the main reason why I transferred to Auburn was because I had a job working at a local radio station while I went to school, and they let me do some play-by-play. Well, so I've always done play-by-play. That's what I've done. I've done a bunch of other stuff. I worked at WAUD with Rod Bramlett, who remains one of my dearest memories and dearest friends ever. He and I worked together forever. Then I worked in Opelika for a while with Andy Burcham. He and I did a morning show there for several years, one of my closest friends, and then started doing a lot of television. And I had a chance, therefore, when I did television, to get it out a little bit more. And they had asked me if I would be interested in working at the same radio station that Jim Fife worked at, Sports Radio 740 in Montgomery. I would work a little bit with him, and I would do a talk show with John Longshore, who I'd never met before. I'll never forget, that was May 19th, 1997, when we started. If you do the math, that is 26 years together doing that show with him. It started in the afternoons. It's been in the mornings. We've always had great ratings. We've always had, very fortunate to have really good sponsorships and things like that. So, yeah, it's been going on. I do it from most of the time, 80% of the shows, I do it from here in my home studio where we're talking now. I do it once a week at the Ford dealership in Montgomery. And they've been really good because I've also done it on the road with Troy. I've done it from, I must have done it from 60 or 70 different spots around the country when I'm following Troy football or basketball or baseball or whatever. So it allows you to be, there's a lot of flexibility in where I can do it from, but still, you've got to put together a interesting, compelling show a lot of times in a hotel room in Jonesboro, Arkansas, with your roommate, the sports information guy, asleep in the bed behind you. So there's been a lot of great times, and of course, it's all about football. We talk a lot of other stuff. I talk a lot of other stuff, but even right now, when people ask, "Hey, it's late June, it's early July, what do you guys talk about?" We talk about football. That's what we do. We talk everything else too, but you can always come back to football. And, the way football has been with Alabama in this state and a couple of times here and there with Auburn and, of course, Troy. Times have been good for sports talk radio in this section of the country, Phillip. You know that.
Oh, yeah, there's always some talk about with the states,
No
the schools in the state. So I was going to ask you, is there a chance you could be doing the show from Manhattan, Kansas this season?
There's a chance. There sure is. Usually on Saturday games, we leave Friday after the show, and we usually, Manhattan's a flight trip, so we'll hurry and get in time for the flight. But if there's a Thursday game, or like last year at the bowl game down in Orlando, for the bowl game down in Orlando, the Cure Bowl against UT San Antonio, I had to do 2 of my morning radio shows from the hotel in Orlando, and we had to do a Trojan talk from there too at the coaches show. So yeah, you've got to be ready for anything in any type of circumstances.
Looking back at last season, just a great magical year for the Trojans. We all know the 1-2 start, the Hail Mary by Appalachian State, then they didn't lose again the rest of the year. When you look back at last season, I'll change that question up a little bit. Just John Summerall, year one. How did he do it? How did he come in? Because, the 3 previous years, Troy couldn't get past 5 wins. They get to 12. What do you think was the key to the success for the Trojans last season?
Well, on the field, obviously, was the defense. I don't know that I've ever seen a better defense in the group of 5, much less in the Sun Belt Conference. And the numbers were really good defensively. The defensive stats were good. They didn't lead the league in a lot of defensive statistics, but that was because they called the offense according to what the defense does. If you had a 10-point lead in the second half on the road, then you're going to be a lot more conservative with that defense. And, you may give up the ball a little bit more. You may give it up on fourth down a little bit more, but you're not going to be all that creative or aggressive on offense, knowing what the defense has. That's the X's and O's of it. But Phillip, you'll remember in the previous 3 years, it was so close. In the 2021 season, I think there were 5 games that were decided by 1 score or less. Mm-hmm. And if we had won 3 of those 5, if we had won 2 of those 5, we'd have gone to a bowl game. In the seasons that we're talking about, when it was so close, in 2020, just a play away from, making a bowl game. 2019, 2021, when ULM opted out of the last game of the year, that was 2020 actually. If we'd been able to play that game at home and ULM was winless and we win that game, we go to a bowl game there. So it was so close. So more than anything else, the difference has been the culture. So many of the games last year were so close. The Army game by 1 point, the 17-point deficit at Louisiana and coming back to win that one, holding on to win, just several of those games. It seems as though they all were close except, the Sun Belt Championship game. maybe 2 years ago, we don't win those games if it wasn't for, a little bit more belief and a little bit more culture in amongst this team. So I think Summerall, more than anything else, kind of got the players to believe in themselves and believe in each other to where when the game is on the line, they made the play to win it as opposed to what had happened the last several years.
Do you have a favorite memory from last season?
The thing I remember most was two things. One of them was just how surreal it was in the Sun Belt Championship game. And Troy's won several of those. It's not surreal to be in that situation. But you'll remember in the second half, in the second quarter, it was 31-0.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at Jerry and we're like, is this real? Can this be happening? Because everything had been such a grind up to that point. And sitting there thinking, can you believe that? Because Coastal is good. They got the best player in the league and have for the last 3 years. I remember that as well. Of course, the Appalachian State thing. And who knows? If the thing at the end of Appalachian State, the Hail Mary, didn't happen, maybe this team wouldn't have been as cohesive as they ended up being. So you can look at that. I remember probably as much as anything, Army having a field goal attempt late in the ball game to win it. Troy won that game 10-9. Army could have won it at the very end, a field goal, 40-something yards. And, we were all so close, winning so close, and we're thinking, well, this may be it right there. And the guy pulled it just a little bit left, and the stadium went berserk. And it was a full house there. So, yeah, you remember all of those things for sure, because every game, it seemed like there was not a snap that was taken in any of those that didn't come with the game on the line.
Yeah, I felt Troy was going to win the Sun Belt Championship game, but I remember watching that. I had that on one of my screens in my room where I watched my games at. I was like, whoa, did Grace McCall not come today or something?
Everything worked perfectly in that period of time. And then in the second half, Troy played to the lead and, played a lot softer on defense, and Coastal got a couple of scores. But at that point, it seemed as though every break went Troy's way. Everything Troy tried worked. And against a team like Coastal Carolina, that never happens. Mm-hmm. But it happened that afternoon.
So let's look at this team. This team has a lot of players coming back from last season. I look at it, Gunnar Watson. It's always good when you have a quarterback that is experienced as he is. Because Barry, there's two teams in our state that don't really know who their quarterback is. Right. Mm-hmm. The Trojans know who their quarterback is. They got a lot of guys coming back on the defense side of the ball. But what sticks out to you going into the season? We're talking here in July with this Troy Trojan team.
Well, defensively, a couple of names that I think are going to be counted upon. But let me tell you, the first thing about Gunnar, who's one of my favorite players ever. I was talking with Coach Summerall during the spring, and he was talking about Goose Crowder, the transfer from West Virginia. He is big, he's strong, he throws it so well, he runs it really well. Goose would win a lot of quarterback skills competitions against a lot of really good quarterbacks. He said, but what Gunnar has is Gunnar has the team. The team will go to war, pardon the phrase, for Gunnar Watson. Not that they wouldn't for somebody else, but they believe in him because they've been through it with him. And you're right, you cannot replace that. You can eventually do it, but you can't do it quickly. And so Gunnar, he does have that. A couple of things. I think the two players that I will call a lot, one of them is going to be Kimani Vidal. He was so great in the final 4 games of the year when he ran for 700 yards. He was just phenomenal. I think they're going to ride him a lot this year. He is poised to have a breakout year. And on defense, without Carlton Marshall, watch out for Jaden McDonald. You know him, the guy he transferred from Iowa, an inside linebacker who had a 16-tackle game earlier in his career. Well, he missed a lot of time last year because of an injury. Didn't finish the year. He's healthy. He looks great. They're going to go with him quite a bit. The question marks on offense is going to be the offensive line and the receivers. I love what they've done in the transfer portal along the offensive line. And in the receivers, there's a couple of guys. Deshaun Stoudemeyer, Jabri Barber from down there in Dothan is going to be healthy. And Jabri was maybe the best wide receiver on the team when he was healthy early last year. And a Kentucky transfer named Chris Lewis. The strength of the team, as far as a position group, is going to be the defensive front. gosh, you've got Javon Solomon and you've got Richard Gibonor and you've got TJ Jackson, who was first team all league on the outside. There's a couple of transfer guys in here. Edwards, a transfer from Louisville, a couple of guys from JUCO, Stephen Catalidge, Raymond Cutts. They're going to really be able to get after the passer. That's going to be a real thing this year.
Yeah, with TJ Jackson, Richard Jubinor. I mean, you're looking at two guys that were top 5 in the Sun Belt last year coming back. And look, when you can get pressure on the quarterback the way they can, that if you do have any issues on the other parts of your defense, that covers up a lot because, hey, the quarterback's laying down, getting sacked, running for his life. It doesn't really matter what else is going on out there.
Yeah, probably the best DB is going to be Reddy Stewart, who was first team all league last year. He's the best defensive back in the league. On the other side, you've got not only Caleb Ransall, but another year with O'Shea Fletcher in the defensive backfield deep. You got an Iowa transfer named Reggie Bracey, who I really like. Just a lot of talent on the defensive side. Again, no Carlton Marshall, and that'll be weird not having him out there. But I still think the defense is going to be really, really talented.
Yeah, I still don't know what the NFL was thinking about not, nobody picking up Carlton Marshall.
That's a whole show for you and me right there. So we could fill up the entire time talking about that.
Yeah, I was kind of hopeful. I mean, I know I'm glad he got to the CFL, but I was really hopeful maybe the Birmingham Stallions would have somehow got up there and said, okay, let me show you guys in state what I can do once again. But anyways, and it's interesting with quarterback to me with Troy, because in the past couple of years, it seemed like it was Gunnar Watson, but there was always another guy like Garrett Dagey was there last year. And there's been other guys, but this year, obviously, he's cemented in as a guy. And I remember after T-Day, I talked with Josh Boutwell, and I was telling him, I said, Josh, how many quarterbacks threw passes in the T-Day game? Because they had I know some guys have left the program, but they've got a lot of guys sitting there behind Gunnar Watson too, fighting it out.
And different skill sets. We mentioned Goose Crowder, who does a lot of things well, still trying to get, feel his way around a little bit. But gosh, I love Tucker Kilcrease. Sumrall really likes him. He actually told me he's got a little bit of Grayson McCall to him in that, he's got a little panache and all of that. I love the freshman kid, Sherrod. JD is a guy that Troy really, really was after. He's got a great future with the Trojans as well. And they all do different things well. Gunnar is not as athletic as say a Goose Crowder, doesn't have as strong of an arm as a Sherrod, or doesn't have some of the ability to move around like Tucker Kilcrease. So they all do different things. They all have a great deal of belief from this staff, and I'm interested to see how they do apportion snaps behind Gunnar. When that opportunity comes during the regular season. There's a lot of guys who can do the job.
In looking at the schedule, and we mentioned a little bit, you brought Stephen F. Austin to kick off the year. They play at Kansas State, but I know, obviously the Coach Summerall would never want you to do this. But the 2nd of November, South Alabama. My personal feeling from what I've seen of what the Sun Belt has coming back, I feel like that could end up being the de facto Sun Belt championship game. No disrespect to some of the, like if Coastal could get there again, and James Madison was good last year. I know there's other good teams, but it just feels like with what both Troy and South Alabama have coming, because South Alabama's pretty much got their whole team from last year coming back, and they'll be coming to Troy. That to me, when I look at Troy's schedule, that's the biggest one that sticks out to me. Is that South Alabama matchup.
It is at home, in South Alabama. If you look at all of the early preseason preview magazines, a lot of them have South Alabama picked to win the league, and I get that. I understand that. They were 10-2 last year for a reason, and they've got, I want to say, 18 starters back. Troy's got 12. That game is in Troy, and I'm trying to find little nuances. Troy plays at home on that Thursday after going to Texas State the previous Saturday, so that's a short week from a pretty long road trip. Meanwhile, South Alabama, they got to play that previous Saturday too, but they have to play it at home. So that's not as taxing, but they do have to go on the road to Troy. Troy's won, I think, 5 in a row, 6 in a row in that series, something like that. And, they've done that because they've had the better program. South Alabama's an up-and-comer. I do believe that the one key factor, the one X factor in the whole thing is that the vet is going to be nuts that night, that Thursday night, because number one, it's the battle for the belt more than anything else. Number two, both of these programs will be in position by that time, by that first week in November, to challenge for the Sun Belt Championship. But also, they're two really, really good football teams. I'm looking forward to that more than I can tell you.
Yeah, I am too. Man, I don't want to rush the season. Never, never, never. But that will be one to look ahead to and look forward to. And Barry, it's been good having you on. I always enjoy our chats when I have you on during this time. Like I told you off air, I had you on during the season last year. We'll have to try to do that again this season. But it's always an honor to have you on the show. But listeners, viewers, if they want to check you out, where can they find you? The broadcast, the radio show,
Yeah.
the podcast. You're all over
Yeah.
the place.
It all seems like the clock runs quicker when you and I are talking. We're already, 20 minutes in. It seems like we're just getting warmed up. In the mornings, 7 to 10, like you mentioned, Sports Radio 740. There's a Sports Radio 740 app. If you're not in the Montgomery, Alabama area, you can go online at sportsradio740.com or on iHeartRadio to check it out there, 7 to 10 every weekday morning. And the Troy broadcasts on the Troy Sports Radio Network actually begin on the last Monday in August with Trojan Talk with Coach Summerall. All of those are available on the Troy Athletics app and on just 15 different stations all around the state of Alabama and Northwest Florida, all over the place, and at TroyTrojans.com.
All right, sounds good, Barry. As always, again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Always appreciate it, Phillip. Thanks a bunch.
All right, once again, thanks to Tony Tsoukalas and Barrett McKnight for being the guest this week on the Phillip Jordan Show. So as we get out here, I got a couple things I want to talk about before we get out of here. Now, something I'm doing new. I'm creating content, putting up content. It's been some written content for the Wiregrass Daily News, which is in conjunction with what I do with 969 The Legend and Dothan Wolves and stuff like that. So a lot of Alabama, Auburn, and Troy content. And you say, why Troy? Because Troy's like an hour away from us. So we're talking Troy. So far I've put up some quarterback and some running back articles kind of previewing the upcoming season. And I just wanted to glance real quickly at the wide receivers for these teams. Now, I didn't really get into the receivers for Tony Tsoukalas there. I had planned to, but I told him a certain time we'd be done just to get around to it. That's what happens. A lot of times I will prep for a whole lot more than we probably get to, but you don't want to do it the other way. You don't want to prep enough, and then, you don't have nothing to talk about. When I look at Alabama receivers, and we talked a lot about quarterback with Tony too. We talked about, replacing Bryce Young. Tyler Butner's coming in for Notre Dame. You got Ty Simpson. You got Jalen Milroe there. But also for me as receiver, I think Alabama's got talent at receivers. But as we saw last season, it didn't really feel like there was always somebody stepping up for Bryce Young. Bryce Young had to make them better, but you just didn't have that guy like even you had the year before with Jameson Williams and John Mechie. And then even the past, all the NFL wide receivers Alabama has had with Tua and Jalen and Matt Jones were there. So, and Jermaine Burton coming back and Ja'Cory Brooks, that's your top two receivers returning from last year. Burton had 40 catches, 677 yards. He had 7 touchdowns on the year. And then Brooks, he was 39 catches, 674 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I think with Jermaine Burton coming over for Georgia, that a lot of the thought was, okay, Burton's coming over. He's in a more tight end oriented offense, running the ball, and the tight end is just a big deal with this team with Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington with that team. He's going to come over to Alabama. He's going to fill that John Mechie role. He could explode, has a great year and head off to the NFL. He did have a bad year, but I don't think he had the year that maybe a lot of Alabama fans in particular were hoping he would have. Ja'Cory Brooks is a guy, he's made some big catches, but the consistency is not there. Can he do this on a week-to-week basis? Be that guy to be that threat. Isaiah Bond is coming back as well. Emmanuel Henderson, who is from down here in my neck of the woods, he went to Geneva County, was a top running back recruit, turning wide receiver. He was more of a specialist last season for Alabama on special teams, kick returns, and such. See what he can do. Now Malik Benson and Kendrick Law are there at receiver. So I want to see one of these receivers step up for whoever the quarterback is going to be, because you don't have a quarterback necessarily that we believe can pull you out of a hole, can be that, great eraser of other things. You're going to need receivers to step up for these quarterbacks when you have to throw the ball. I think Alabama's going to be more run-oriented with what they got, but at the same time, you're going to need some of these receivers to step up for Alabama. Now, I was looking at Auburn receivers. Javarius Johnson returns. He's their top leading receiver coming back. He did some decent things for them. Auburn needs some depth. They needed depth with Hugh Freeze. They need something receiver. Receiver's been an issue the last 2 years. Coy Moore is back. Camden Brown's there as well. Camden Brown's a guy, a lot of positive things going into A-Day. Didn't see a lot of any of these receivers, mainly because the weather was bad during A-Day for Auburn. But he's a guy, Hugh Freeze talked about him. A lot of other players you've seen talk about him. He's got some ability. Now, we haven't seen it in game action. That's something you hope to see. Coy Moore, he had some nice moments last season. He had some big catches against LSU, his former team. Auburn's going to need some of that for him. Now, they bring in Caleb Burton, highly touted recruit there at Ohio State. So Ohio State's receiver room is loaded. So he comes in, talent at position. Then you have Nick Martiners coming in. He's a tall target. Now, watching him in his spring game, again, it was bad weather, so I'm not going to completely get on him. But he has some drops. He comes from Cincinnati. He was more productive at Hawaii where it was before, but he's a tall target. He has ability. He showed that at Hawaii. He showed some good things at Cincinnati. Numbers weren't as great as it was at Hawaii. We know that the offense, though, kind of leans into that. So we'll see what happens there with him. He could be a good target. So Auburn's got some players there. Hugh Freeze went out transfer portal. Got some guys coming back. So we'll see. And Auburn should be good at tight end too. Auburn's got a lot of good players there at tight end. And then the Troy wide receivers. Now, where are they at this? Deshaun Stoudemire is their returner, top returning receiver. He was third on the team last year. He had 507 yards on the year. They do get Jabri Barber back, which will be huge. What he can do. He can be big in the kick return game. Also, they didn't have him for the last 8 games of last year. So for Gunnar Watson, having some more weapons there. And then they do add some transfers from Alabama, Jackson Thomas and Michael Johnson. So they're bringing them in too as well. So they're going to need some receivers. I do believe Troy is going to need to be more offensive oriented this season. I don't think defense is going to be bad, but I don't think defense is going to be as good. So the offense is going to have to make up for that a little bit more. And we've seen what Gunnar Watson can do. And, this team can do. And I broke down the running backs. Kamani Vidal, he's coming back, but there's not a lot of depth at running back behind him. Asa Martin coming in from Memphis. We'll see how that goes with him. But Gunnar Watson maybe have shoulders, and Gunnar Watson's pretty much a guy because there's a lot of inexperience behind him. Right? In the past, it was kind of like, does Gunnar Watson have to look over his shoulder? There's other quarterbacks. You had Garrett Dagey there this past year. You've had other quarterbacks there at Troy, so we'll see. But I think they're going to need more receivers in the quarterback in the passing game this upcoming year than they did last year, just because defense was so good. You didn't score all points on Troy last year. And again, I will say this, sorry, because I know if I had some Troy fans listening, I'm not saying Troy's defense is going to be bad. I just don't feel like they're going to be as good as they were last year, and the offense may have to be a little bit better than they were last season. And lastly, I want to close the thing up. The whole show is college football, right? And that's pretty much what we do here is college football. A little college basketball mixed in. Every now and then we'll get into some other stuff here on the show. But I want to throw out a congratulations to an in-state team, and that is the Birmingham Stallions. Now, the photo that's up on the screen is from Fox Sports. The Birmingham Stallions won their back-to-back USFL championship. I've had a couple conversations with Josh Boutwell over at Troy Messenger talking about this team. They won 28-12 this past Saturday night against the Pittsburgh Maulers to win, like I said, their second straight USFL championship. They're the only champion since the league has come back. They are 21-3 over the 2 years. Skip Holtz has done a great job, and they really came into the year you're thinking, okay, going to be about the same. Last season, they were run first team defense. Jamar Smith made enough plays with his arm. They won a lot of close games. Well, this year is all about Alice Magoo. I mean, Jamar Smith gets hurt in the first game. He didn't have Bo Scarborough all year. Scooby Wright was in and out of the lineup, didn't play a lot. They lose Marlon Williams, their best wide receiver to start, and they just played great all year. They had a couple hiccups against Houston and New Orleans in there. They went 8-2 during the regular season. dominated New Orleans in the South Division Championship. And then it was the game kind of went how I thought it would go against Pittsburgh. It was kind of like really what these two teams are. I mean, Birmingham's going to score points, and Pittsburgh moved the ball. They had some success, but they could not get the ball in the end zone. They had to kick 4 field goals. And this team was all about Alex Magoo this year. 67% passer, 2,105 yards, 20 touchdowns, a threat on the ground. He really carried the team, so it was different. It was a very quarterback-oriented team versus what they were last year. So I just wanted to kind of close out the show and congratulate the Birmingham Stallions on another championship. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. It's nice being back. Let's see how it does. See if we get some new listeners, some new viewers with the show back. This will be the plan going forward. I'll let you guys know if anything changes, but I'll be back next week. We're previewing teams. We're getting ready. College football season's around the corner. Some cool stuff. As always, the pod around an hour. Try to keep it between an hour and a half. I'm going to do one a week, but a lot of fun being back. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Really means a lot if you do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can check it out over on the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Hit subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video. And also read that on a future edition. If you are around the Wiregrass area, check out the Wiregrass High School Football Report. That show is back. Been back for a few weeks now, getting geared up for the high school football season in the Wiregrass area, southeast corner of Alabama. Check that out. And you can also check out all my written work at Last Word on College Football and the Wiregrass Daily News. It's been a joy. Glad to be back, guys. I'll talk to you guys next week. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Phillip Jordan Show. Subscribe to the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch the show over at the Phillip Jordan Media YouTube channel. Got a question or topic idea? Email the show at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Join us next time for more great football talk.